Welcome back to another episode of Impossible Equals I'm Possible. Happy Wednesday. Super excited for another incredible episode. We have another guest, but first I just want to say hello to everyone who's here, who whether you're coming back or you're new. The whole premise behind this show of Impossible Equals Impossible was giving people inspiration. And when I had first came on LinkedIn and really started creating, it was after there there were these mass layoffs, right? I'm sure we can all relate to seeing the green banners all through our newsfeed. And I realized that for a lot of people, that was kind of their darkest time in their life, right? And there was a lot of I don't want to say negativity, but it just wasn't like inspirational. It wasn't uplifting. And the whole point behind this show was we've all overcome challenges and obstacles in our life, right? But the problem with social media is we tend to like to give people this highlight reel of only the good things, right? And I wanted to bring people on who overcame incredible circumstances, obstacles like I did, and really kind of share their story of how they came from impossible to now impossible, and allowing their story to be someone else's survival guide. And this show for me has been an absolute pleasure. I love doing it every week. I love bringing on a new guest and really giving them a platform to share their story, to interact with you in the audience. Hopefully there's no issues, because I know that these live videos have challenges. If anybody's in the chat, can you comment below so I can see you, hopefully? But with that being said, our guest tonight is a good friend, actually, that I met through an audio event on LinkedIn. Sandra, so good to see you. Awesome. Good that somebody's here. Okay. My good friend tonight, Lee, Ebby, and oh, who's here? Nelly, good to see you. Hello. Sandra, hello. Nice to see you. And Lee has been an entrepreneur since 2013 in the construction and remodeling business, and he's a business coach, building houses from the ground up and raising his net worth from $0 to over a quarter of a million. His goal is to use his story to help people go from where they are to where they want to be. Our perspective and how we look at the world will vary based on the lens and information that we see. And like the title says, Lee, Tara, so good to see you. Soul Sister, so good to see you. And I know that Lee is so happy to see you here as well. But with that being said, right, the title in the title of the show, from poor farm boy to real estate investor. I don't know about you guys, but I'm intrigued to hear this story. And I'm always fascinated to see how people have became or become the person that they are. So with no further ado, want to welcome to the show my good friend Lee. Ebby, Lee, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all your support on my posts, seeing you at events, and thank you just so much for being here. I can't wait to hear your story. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm excited to share my story. I've actually never really um, shared kind of my story from kind of the beginning
Yeah.
at any point. It's something that's just always kind of been there, and it's like storytelling is not a big facet of who I have been in the past, but it's something that I see that I need to incorporate into who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, right? When you really get to reflect how far you've come from like where you started versus where you're at now. And where I want to start this conversation is kind of, well, one, who is Lee Ebby, and what have tell us basically how you've become kind of who you are.
Well, Paul, that's that's a really good question because coming from the background that I have of farm boy, uh, and I could add to that an eighth grade dropout. So anybody that's in the room that thinks you have to be highly educated, um, that's not true. Now that doesn't mean that I haven't spent a lot of time reading books and educating myself because I have. I've committed to uh, lifelong learning, and so it comes through a process, and it's getting up every day and understanding that for for things to change, I have to change. It's understanding um, if I don't get my philosophy straight, then nothing else really is going to matter until I get that part right. And so to go from nothing to something, it doesn't happen overnight. At least not in the real world. Now you're going to hear some uh, stories from time to time where it does happen. Not saying it can't happen, but realistically speaking, it's a process. It's a journey.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So talk to us kind of more about. So we had a question in the chat. Sandra wants to know how old you are.
I am 46, actually 47's coming up this month.
Oh wow. So this is a early birthday present for you. So you it's interesting, right? Because you talked about you were a poor farm boy in Wisconsin. Talk to us about kind of what life was like, and then share maybe more on kind of how that impacted like your education system, because you said that you were an eighth grade dropout, and then what was really kind of the turning point in your life that allowed you to kind of get to where you're at now. And I know that construction and remodeling has been a big part of that kind of transformation, but kind of walk us through a bit. How
Sure.
did you get to that point?
Oh, the my father was a carpenter by trade, but he was also a jack of all trades, and uh, I grew up on a farm. He was actually taking care of his uncle's farm at the time, and um, yeah, it was through that process we ended up moving across state lines into Minnesota. My dad continued to uh, diversify. It ended up taking on a management position over in another in Minnesota. But the whole process is, I mean, growing up was watching my mom and dad struggle with having no money. I mean, it was we left the farm in debt, and my mom was very uh, persistent and consistent as far as sending the money that she could to pay off the debts. And so
Wow.
that was I grew that's what I grew up with, and we didn't have a lot of money, um, and so that at a young age I was actually uh, told that I was not gonna I would never amount to anything. And I think it
Mm,
came out of frustration or whatever. So I kind of had that chip on my shoulder
mm,
for a large part of my life. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to prove that wrong. I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to figure it out. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out.
yeah.
And so that was, I started construction uh, for my uncle when I was 18.
Mm,
That's when I started learning, how to build houses and kind of that whole thing.
mm,
And so it was really just a journey. Um, and I always tell people, you know, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12. I mean,
mm.
realistically, it's in my blood. When I was a kid, my my dad worked for a company, and his boss said, "You know what?" He goes, "You should go pick up golf balls." He's like, he goes, I'll pay you $1 for every Pinnacle." I don't know if anybody knows about what golf balls, but Pinnacle was a brand of ball, and he's, "I'll pay you for every Pinnacle gold you find. I'll give you $1." And so I literally would go out and pick up golf balls. I would ride my bike 5 miles to town and pick up golf balls. Um, and you would ask about the education
Mm,
system. My background, I was born and raised Mennonite. Still am a Mennonite.
mm,
That's kind of like a Methodist, just more conservative, or a Baptist. It's just more
mm.
conservative. Um, and so we didn't uh, participate in the public school system. And so when
Oh,
we
wow.
when we moved to Minnesota, it was a homeschool. And so that's why it was like I went to school till I was 16, and literally in some of my subjects I was in eighth grade, but some of it I was like, I mean, like English is only sixth grade.
Yeah.
Now I want to quantify that and say I have my 12th grade. I went back and got my GED because I felt it
Hmm.
was important.
Yeah.
Education is important to me and my family,
Mm.
uh, because if you think what's the phrase? I'm losing it right now. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Mm. Yeah.
you know, and so yeah, I believe education is important,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that was really the motivational factor for me was I'm going to figure out how to be successful.
Yeah.
Uh, I didn't have anybody really in my family, and so in 2001 or so, I got into the wonderful or not so wonderful, depending on your network network marketing. I'm not going to say anything bad about it because some people do really well. As the 5 percenters that can kill it in that industry.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
really direct sales. I mean,
Direct
that
sales,
that's
yes,
really what it is. People
it
uh,
is.
people use network marketing, but what it is, it's just direct sales. So
It really
yeah.
is. Yeah. Uh, and so that, and I built an organization in uh, actually two different companies. One was a legal insurance, and the other one was a health and wellness,
Hmm.
vitamin company.
Yeah.
Um, and but there was always a missing ingredient.
Mm,
There was always that thing that I just never quite. And so, with a lot of time and a lot of money spent, uh, that missing piece, and this is for anybody that's here tonight, is philosophy.
mm, yeah.
The philosophy is everything you know and how it makes you feel. And so, for anybody that's listening tonight, if you're wondering why things aren't working out the way you want them to work out, if your life's not quite where you would like it to be, I would challenge you, look at your philosophy. What are you thinking about? How that and what your that negative self-talk that's going on in your head, find a way to change that. Find a way to can get that to positive self-talk where you
Mm,
can achieve, you do deserve, you are worthy, because that negative is going to hold you back until you get your mindset correct and get your head in a good place with the philosophy. And I'll just share the other 5 words that follow that. I shared them with Paul earlier, but your philosophy leads to your attitudes. Your
mm.
attitudes leads to action. Action leads to results, and your results leads to your lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so
Powerful.
if you can get those 5 words down and then figure out your philosophy is the track that everything runs on. And when you get the philosophy figured out, then the rest of it you can continue to grow and just commit to lifelong learning. Commit to becoming 1% better every day.
Yeah, that was powerful. And it was interesting because as I was listening to you share, one of the things that I found that has been really challenging lately, especially because I have a friend that has uncovered like a lot of information that a lot of like these influencers and creators and basically people that I kind of really looked up to on LinkedIn aren't the people who they kind of say they are. And what it really did for me was it kind of caused me to question and ask myself this question of like, what is real? And I was having a conversation with somebody from one of my communities. She was a guest speaker. She's lived all over the world. She's a part of the UN. And she said that nothing nothing is real besides physics, and everything is either a social construct or a story. And when she said that, it reminded me about why it's so important to focus on the story that you're telling yourself, because our brain our mind can't distinguish neurologically between imagination and reality, right? So a lot of the things that you shared were really powerful. And I the place that I want to go next, well, first let's get to the audience because we have some people. Omar's here, so good to see you, my friend. Lee, it looks like Sandra is a fan of yours. She says that she would love to interview you on her show, so you'll probably have to reach out to her. And Lisa's here. Good to see you, Lisa. She says your beliefs and baseline identity. Yeah, and one of the and Lee, I'm kind of curious for you, right? Because you talked about like these different like five different steps, right? Philosophy, attitude, action, results, and then lifestyle. Do you have like kind of your own, I guess, like code for life, if you will? Because I know I'll just share mine. For example, I came up with the five I's probably like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's impact, integrity, intuition, inspiration, and the fifth I is the name of the show, impossible equals impossible. And what I really found that has done for me is that's essentially the guide that I use for my life, right? And a lot of the decisions and collaborations and people and basically everything I sort along those five things. If it doesn't fit, then it's out. So I'm curious for you, do you have like a personal kind of thing like that you use, or do you mainly focus on kind of what you shared?
Uh, I at the moment I don't, but next week I will. I'm working with that. On with my coach at the moment, and it's really it. I call it designing a life that
Yeah,
works,
definitely.
and because here's the deal. It's pretty simple. Every detail of your
Yeah.
life that you leave out, someone else is going to fill.
Yep.
So you better take the time in which I'm going to over the next week write out exactly where my life, what I want it to look like,
Yeah.
and
Powerful.
get it wrote down with
Yeah.
dates and deadlines because that
Powerful.
is the key. Uh, Powerful intentions, it's all part of it. Um, but until it's wrote down and you can visualize every detail, it's just a pipe dream.
Yeah. No, that's powerful, and I'm gonna hold you to it. A lot of I'm big on accountability, and I believe that it's really important to do or to keep the promises that you make to yourself. Right, we're on a social media platform where people can post whatever they want. They can go in these audio events and say whatever they want, but at the end of the day, it comes down to does I, I got to train within one of the like most elite performance coaches in the world. He's been a coach for the past like, I think 10 Super Bowl champions. His name is Ben Newman, and he would always say is that I'm not going to have a conversation with what you're saying. He said I'm going to have a conversation with your action. And he said if that doesn't align, he said we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
And I always will remember that from him because discipline was like my theme for this year. And he talked about discipline as essentially being aggressive patience. And I know that from what you were saying in the beginning, you were talking about how so many people want to do this whole like get rich quick thing and all these type of things. So I'm really curious for you because here you are, right? You were born and raised like on a farm in Wisconsin, eighth grade dropout. You did go back to get your GED, but you're not in Wisconsin. So I'm kind of curious for you, how in the heck did you get to how in the heck did you get to South Carolina? I have a feeling that there's a fascinating story behind that.
Well, actually, yes, there is. And I want to go back and acknowledge Sandra, and I would love to come on your show. And anybody that has any questions that would want to DM me, I do my best to respond to everybody that ask relevant questions. So sometimes people say, "Well, how can I support you?" And it's like, just that's not complicated here. Just like my post, and if I want something, I'll reach out. But just show up on a somewhat regular basis on my platform, and I'm fine. That's the way we support each other. It's not rocket science, but I would love to, and I want to thank everybody in the audience, Omar and Lisa and anybody else that's in here that I've missed. I want to thank you for showing up and supporting Paul, because Paul has a lot of good audio rooms, and I love this show as well. Um, Now, what was your question? I got sidetracked. Oh, I
um,
know. I got it. I got it. Never mind. Uh, how I got to South Carolina. I was actually was in the winter of or fall of '96, uh, and
I
I
wasn't born
had
yet.
um, my job in Wisconsin was seasonal, and so I'm like, I had a sister that lived in Florida. I said, you know what? I'm gonna just go out and go to Florida for the winter. Um, her husband and had a yard care business. I was like, I'll work for him. I'm just gonna kind of freelance it and see what happens. Well, a country boy going to the city, that did not work out real well. I lasted for a couple months, but I said, nah, this is just too much city for me. And so I had a brother that lived in South Carolina, and so I came and visited him and uh, made some connections, contacts, and basically was able to get a job in South Carolina for the rest of the winter. And now you have to understand, in Wisconsin on New Year's Day, it's typically going to be somewhere around 0 or -0 um, for the weather. On New Year's Day, 1997 in South Carolina, it was 70 degrees. I was riding horseback uh, on New Year's Day, and I was like, if this isn't heaven, I'm not sure. I was like, I was just so amazed because I'm like, I said, I'm not going back to that refrigerator or that deep freeze because I said, that's just, I can't. I said, I don't like the cold. I said, I'm going to figure out how to stay here. And so that's how I got to South Carolina. Uh, and from there, I started, I worked actually at a trust company for a while, but then I got back into building pole barns and back to building
Yeah.
houses. So
I I'm pretty sure you told me this the first time we met, but correct me if I'm wrong. I remember you telling me this like really powerful story about how you basically like packed up your car. Essentially, it was you, right? And
yes,
that was how
well,
you moved. That was the story that I was kind of, I guess, like for me, I was kind of curious on like how a lot of that happened because I know you had mentioned like it was kind of like you went all in on yourself essentially, if I'm not mistaken, right?
that is correct.
Yeah.
That's actually a little bit later in my story, um, because
Okay, we'll stay on pace. We don't want to we don't want to jump ahead.
uh,
I just want to make sure because
Yeah.
I kept thinking about it. I was like, I want to know about this.
Yes. Yes. So that would have what happened was over the next few years. Um, I worked in construction and kind of around, and then I got into the network marketing thing and
Mhm.
was sold this dream,
Mm.
and I bought it. And next thing I know, I have a car I can't afford, and it goes back to your philosophy. I didn't get that fixed, and I wasn't, and so in 2003, I moved back to Minnesota with my parents.
Oh wow.
Um, and so I'm like, all right, I got to figure this thing out. And in that process, I met my wife in Belize.
Wow.
In
That's
'99, my best friend got married to her first cousin. And uh, I was also, photography was a hobby of mine at one point. And
cool.
actually, I took online classes, or not back, it wasn't online, it was through the mail back then, with the New York Institute of Photography, and
Mhm.
actually became a professional photographer.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Um,
That's fascinating.
and so I worked with a professional studio here in South Carolina. But in that process, I learned that I don't want a studio. I don't want to be tied down. I
Mm,
was
you
in
wanted more of like freedom.
I wanted freedom. And in that process, digital photography came along, and I never made the transition from in the professional ranks. Um, I got out just before digital went crazy in the professional world.
Yeah.
Um, and my wife is like, "You're a photographer," and I said, those days are behind me. I said, the whole digital thing just it put a sour taste in my mouth because
Mm.
it's so much different. And
Yeah.
anybody can be a photographer now. It's no there's no learning the
There
science
used to be
of
like a craft or like a
it used to be a craft. Yes, I
yeah.
mean you're an artist with light. You work with the uh, getting your subjects and everything, and with the right exposure and everything is set up, and it's you become an artist with light. And
Wow. That's a
no,
powerful way to put it. I never actually thought about that. You're an artist with light. And before you move forward, I want to touch on something that you said because it's so important to anybody who is watching in the audience or on the replay. I highly suggest for you to consider what Lee talked about. Somebody sold him their vision, right? We live in a time now where there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of strategists, there's a lot of people who, help you get to where you want to go. And it's really important that you focus on your dream and your vision because if you're going to let somebody sell you their vision, you'll never get what you want because the plan and all these type of things that you're doing is for the vision that they sold you, not the vision that you want. So I did want to touch on that. But Lee, you were
absolutely,
talking about being a photographer and how it was kind of a challenge for you to adjust to the change of technology, right? Because you had to put in all this time to learn this craft, and now it's like everybody has, I mean, nowadays, right, we all have a darn camera with the whole world at our fingertips. That must have been a challenge for you.
well, it was, I like I said, I got out of it right when that happened, and I had figured out that photography was not something that I was going to pursue, so it wasn't a challenge that I had to overcome, but people in the industry definitely had to, because they had to. Because I talked with the professional that I had worked for, and he said, man, it changed so fast,
Yeah.
and he said you had to change with it. It was no, there was no middle ground. It's like you're moving with it or you're out of the game, one of the two.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so yeah, so that's where I kind of left that. go, and then that's where after that I kind of got into the to direct sales and
Mm,
uh, tried tried my hand in that, cut my cut my teeth. But the most important thing that I didn't learn when I was in the field of direct sales, but I've learned it since, and that is the whole getting your philosophy straight. Because I had one of the coaches, mentors that I picked up uh,
mm.
in that field talked about it, and I was too young and ignorant and not paying attention or centered or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
I missed it. I missed it, and I didn't figure it out till recently that that missing ingredient is
Mm,
philosophy, because
yeah.
everything we know and how it makes us feel, it's everything that we put ourselves into, and if we don't get that figured out, it we can't. It's just it's the track that everything runs on. I'll just say it again. It's a and so many people wonder why things aren't working out.
Yeah.
That's
No,
where it
that's
starts.
that's powerful. So I don't want to like jump ahead in your story, but I I'm just really curious, right? Because you and I talked about how I spent a year last year training with Grant Cardone and his executive team in terms of like real estate,
Yes.
and that was like a huge part of kind of our conversation
Yep.
was the whole real estate piece. And I'm kind of curious, like when did you is this when you kind of like got into real estate at this point?
I started studying real estate
Hmm.
kind of the same time as I started direct sales because I
Okay.
read the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Rich Dad, yeah, it's a classic.
and that's a classic. And it's like I want to buy that book for my boys because I have two boys, 16 and 17, and they work with me in my business,
Hmm.
and they are very well grounded boys. I mean, uh, I'm I'm very proud of them. Both of them hardworking. My 16-year-old is his junior class president,
There you
and
go.
probably if not the most popular kid in school, one of the most popular. Uh, he drives a 1981 Corvette that he's bought with mostly his money.
Wow.
And so that's it's a little ahead of the story, but that's had to plug that in because it's important that
Yeah.
we keep our kids grounded.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting too as you're talking about that conversation because I always have like fascinating conversations with people on LinkedIn, and usually, obviously, pretty much 99% of the people that I've had a conversation with on LinkedIn are older than me, and they tend to like group you in kind of the same like group as like the other like Gen Zers and all these type of things. And it's just like it's always fascinating to me when I see people who are always different from the norm because I feel like that in and I'm curious in like in your life experiences, but I know for me every time that I've always gone the road less traveled by or I've been the outlier, that's always been kind of the right decision for me. I wasn't one of those people that I wanted to be popular, I wanted to be liked. I always just wanted to learn and like help people. So I'm kind of curious, like for you, like as you look back on your life and where you're at now, is that kind of like how it was for you, or were you kind of always the were you trying to kind of do like what everybody else was doing type of thing?
No, I was always kind of my own person. Um, didn't necessarily always follow the crowd. I kind of made up my mind what I was going to do, and then I would do that. So no, was never I was never the most popular. I was never the most looked up to kid on the block or anything like that. I just always uh, found ways to entertain myself and do my own thing, and kind of just create uh, whatever I wanted to create. I mean, I would make go karts from lawnmowers. I would do just whatever. I like I said, we grew up poor, so you figured out ways of entertaining yourself.
Yeah, for sure. That's like one of the things that I tell people all the time is like when you don't have money, you become like real innovative because like you have to figure out solutions that work. It's like, okay, I don't have money, but like I still need to get this done, right? Like how can
Yeah,
I do it? And it's funny because a lot of people will tell you that, oh, just outsource it or like pay somebody else to do it. But I find that like you really get so much value when you put that innovation to use, right? And you're actually using your mind and trying to problem solve and do all these type of things. There was a really powerful quote that I got with somebody that I had a conversation with yesterday, and he talked about this idea that the value of an idea isn't necessarily in the merit or the quality of the idea, but it's in the thinking that the idea kind of generated or the thoughts. And I thought that that was so true because most of my ideas I would say are pretty bad, but it's the thinking that comes from the ideas that leads to like, oh, the aha moment, right? Like
right.
usually like our first draft of things is pretty bad. We're just trying to like put something on the paper, and then as you slowly refine it, so to completely get that. I'm I guess so. You were talking before we got a bit sidetracked because you wanted to talk about your son, which is awesome. um yeah, talk to us more about like real estate. Like how did you ultimately kind of get into that? Because that's what you're currently doing now, right? That along the lines of like business coaching type of thing.
That's correct.
Yeah,
I'll take, and let me just catch the story that you wanted,
yeah,
and then I'll pull us up to date with the whole real estate.
yeah,
I'll fast forward through
yeah, absolutely.
some of the
We still
story
got
for
time, so you're good. You're good.
you. So now I got married in 2005. Uh, Basically, I dated, well, dated. Call she was We didn't really date. She was a good friend of mine for many years. But we I married my best friend in 2005, and
Cool.
we were we got married in Belize, honeymooned in Belize, and we came back to the frigid uh,
The
state of
fridge, the
Minnesota.
freezer.
Yeah, to the freezer. And in 2007, right after my second son was born, I said, this is it. We're going south. I said, we're going to South Carolina. I
Wow.
said, yeah. I said, this is my church family
Mhm.
was here, and so I called actually my former boss and told him, hey, you got work? He said, yeah. He said, all right. I said, I'm coming down. We loaded up the truck with everything that we had. Uh, Only piece of furniture that we had to our name was a lazy boy rocking recliner that my wife had bought. We bought when my first son was born,
Wow.
and we loaded up the truck with what we had, and we came to South Carolina.
Yeah. Wow. And I
And
mean, just look at what you've done now. That's incredible. Wow.
so yeah, that was 2007, and I didn't uh, get into real estate until actually we bought our first rental property in 2008, 2018, and then I went
Okay.
really went full time into real estate in 2020.
Wow. So I guess my question to you is, right, you talked about how you essentially uprooted like your life, your family in Minnesota, and you're like, we have one piece of furniture and we're doing this. Like you had like purpose at that point, right? You're like, I need to get out of the freezer. And I know you mentioned earlier in the conversation about how South Carolina to you was kind of like if you could picture like what heaven looked like,
Yeah.
you thought that it was pretty much that. How long did it actually take you to kind of like really transform your life, right? Because there's a lot of people, and I know during like many instances of this show, we would always get people that were like, well, like I just lost my job, like I have no money, inflation, all these type of things. How long did it actually kind of like take you to really get to like stability and get back on your feet type of thing? I'm curious.
Well, uh, I took and worked for other contractors until 2012 was when I went and started my own construction company, Solid Craft Remodeling and Construction, and started to work on my own. Um, and as an entrepreneur, as was there again, it was never something. I mean, yes, I like to be independent, but I never dreamt of really having my own construction company because I
Mm,
saw the headache and the everything that came with it from working for my uncle. I mean, it was like we would sit down and look at plans. I learned to read blueprints from working with my uncle. It's wasn't something that was in my mind. It's not hard to do. For
mm.
some people, they don't make any sense, and that's okay.
That's what
uh,
they call you.
yeah, and so it's like he I learned how to read blueprints, and it's like uh, and but it was never something that I really thought I was going to do on my own. But
Yeah.
here I am, and it's a skill, and this is what I tell my boys. It's a skill nobody can take from you.
Yeah. a
You
hundred
know,
percent.
it's
Completely agree.
and like my oldest son, he's working at Chick-fil-A after school. I said it's all about learning skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
it's not about the money. I said it's about learning skills because the skills that you learn nobody can take from you.
Not only that too, but like, so I was born and raised in Hawaii. So I actually, believe it or not, Lee, I actually didn't have Chick-fil-A until 2021 when I came to when I came to Florida to visit. So it's been a while and actually we didn't get Chick-fil-A in Hawaii until last year. I want to say it was
Really,
like September. Yeah. So
that's interesting.
yeah, but going back to your point, I love what you said, because there's a saying that I love, that like skills pay the bills, and that's always been the way that I've approached personal development for me. Was like I've spent the past 2 years training with some of the most successful people in the world, and I know that that's kind of where our conversation is going to go next, because you and I were talking a lot
Hmm.
about personal development and mentors and all these type of things. So my whole philosophy behind like personal development and masterminds and all these type of things, I look at it as you really kind of pay for the network, right? The information that you learn essentially is kind of free at that point. And my objective, when anytime I train with a coach, I join a community or take some type of course, the whole objective for me is I'm always trying to learn a skill that I can then go and take and monetize later, because we the thing that so many people tend to focus on, right, is like money or building businesses, but the truth is that money and businesses can like both be taken from you, right? Like skills and all these type of things, there's a reason why they say that skills pay the bills, because once you learn something, once you are able to like turn that into, say, like a business or something that you
Yep.
can kind of monetize, that's when it becomes really powerful, because people will pay you a lot of money if you have a really high value skill. So I'm curious for you, like, what are kind of your thoughts on personal development? Like, do you see it that way too? And the real question that I want to know is, who has been the most impactful person in your life, and what was the most valuable thing that they've taught you? So you have a couple questions to chew on there.
Okay. First off, the with the skills, I want to say right behind that is, and you've alluded to it, but it's relationships. If we can learn to build powerful relationships, doesn't matter what we're doing. Relationships in real estate, relationships in any kind of business is the key, because if you don't build relationships with people that have houses to buy, sell, or otherwise,
Yep.
uh, it don't make any difference. Um, I mean, you can go out and throw mud at the wall, and some of it will stick. But
Yep.
if you build powerful relationships, people that and here's another philosophy. You guys are gonna get tired of me my philosophies, but here, I mean, this is powerful.
Yeah.
The fact that there is no pie. Okay, we have this idea that there's only so much pie. You know, if you want to look at a pie, there's only so much of it. No, the pie is unlimited. So
Yep.
don't think that you're in. Yes, there's competition, and competition is good, but I am not going to take any clients from you because they're going to connect with you on your on authenticity,
Yep.
your style, your brand.
Exactly.
So I'm not gonna compete with that. I
Mhm.
may be in the same field as far as coaching, but I'm not gonna compete with your clients.
Yeah.
We're gonna connect. And so the whole and that the whole thing of there is no pie works across the board. It's the same thing in real estate. There is no pie. So we have that's another limiting belief that we put in our head that, well, I got to go get. No, I don't have to. I can just let it flow because what's mine is mine, and nobody's
Yep.
going to take that from me. Uh, and so yeah, it's just as far as the yeah personal development, uh, it that's as old as as the Bible, as Solomon. I mean, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Mm.
First comes thought. Everything starts with thought. Everything starts with what we think about. So it's critical that we understand that and we can build off of that. So first comes thought, and personal development is all about getting better, getting better. If it's 1% a day, learning one new thing a day, whatever you want, however you want to quantify that, that's up to you. But get better.
Yeah, that no, yeah, that was powerful. I really resonated with what you said about the relationships because one of one of the things that I would talk about all the time is that LinkedIn's really about like human connection, and this idea of relationship capital can become greater, and most times it is, than financial capital, just because you have no idea who people know, right?
Right.
Or who they'll become in like my case, right? So it's like you have no, and that's for me what's always like really fascinating is I always like to at least like try to get to know people, unless they show you kind of like who they are, and
Yeah.
then I would say that's kind of where you have to have the self awareness and make the decision, because a lot of times like we end up in these bad relationships because we look at things for kind of what we want them to be versus you know what they are. So I
Yeah.
love that point, and I'm curious for you because we talked about it a little bit on the pre-live, but who's really been the most impactful person in your life, and what was the greatest lesson that they've taught you?
Uh, the ceremony,
Mm,
uh, and being present, just to be present, learning to live in the moment, has probably been the most impactful thing that I've learned. Because we all have noise, we all have busy lives. There's just a lot of things going on, but to be able to take a deep breath, to be able to center yourself and just be present in the conversation that you're in, be present with the people you're hanging out with, even though, I mean, we've all got stuff going on. That's life. And there's always going to be challenges. And it's like, watch watch your language. Watch the words that come out of your mouth. you
Yeah,
know.
for
And
sure.
I say that facetiously, but it's true. Um, because I don't use the word problem. I don't use the word need. It's I don't want to have challenges. You
Mm,
take a problem and you change it to a challenge.
mm,
It makes it a positive word versus a negative word. The
yeah.
same thing with need. You don't want to be needy. I require, it's, but I don't need.
Mm,
And so, yeah, it's your words are powerful.
yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about this idea of being present. So long story short, today, and I made a post about it. Today is the 12-hour a walk day. It's basically like a challenge by one of the people in my community, and I believe that self awareness is the ultimate superpower that you can have, right? And I mean, you and I see it all the time when you go to audio events. Like you see people who will like interrupt people. You see people who come up on stage and what they share is like completely irrelevant
Yeah.
from the conversation. And what you talked about is so important. Like the idea of like being present, being aware. And that was like probably one of the most impactful things that I learned when I went on this 12-hour walk was that I had passed like this neighborhood that I was in like hundreds of times, right? Like you walk it all the time, you see like the houses, the trees, all these type of things. But when I went on this 12-hour walk, because I was like really focused on just detaching from my thoughts, uh from technology, from all like the outside noise, like you were talking about earlier, I had noticed things that I didn't see before. And what really kind of hit me was I made the correlation because you and I are both entrepreneurs. We do that in different phases of our life, right?
Mhm.
Like if you're an entrepreneur, you tend to be kind of all in on your business because it's like if you don't make money, usually like you
Yeah.
have to like pay your bills and you have to eat and all these type of things. So for so many people, because of that focus, their health declines, right? Like sleep, nutrition, all these type of things. And that was really kind of my idea of what really triggered for me was that so many of us are probably like existing more than we are living. And when you become kind of present, it changes the whole conversation completely where you're able to actually see things versus just kind of like be passing by, right? Like you actually see the things around you, the people in front of you, and you start looking at everything differently, right? I know for me, I, I'm not like you, or I don't like the word problem. I just look at problems as like opportunities for me, and that's kind of
Yeah.
like how I phrase it. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, that's been incredibly powerful, and I'm curious for you, right? Like you've overcome a lot of adversity in your life, right? You have like two kids who are like teenagers. um looking back on your life and like all you've kind of achieved, and I always joke with a lot of my friends and the people who come up here that like as much as we've achieved, like we haven't even scratched the surface, right? Because it's like there really is no limit. Like you
That's
said,
right.
it's the only, and that was one of the things that we talked about yesterday in the audio event about money, was that there's no shortage of money on this planet. The only thing that there's a shortage of is desire and discipline, because when you want something enough, you tend to make it happen, right? And
Yeah.
we've shared so many instances on this show about like you wanting to do something and you made it happen. I'm curious for you, when you look back on your life, what has been the most kind of like magical moment that you will always like kind of remember, or that, or if like they told you like you get to pick one moment in your life that is like immortalized forever, what would that be?
Oh, that's a that's a really deep question, Paul. And I'm not sure if I even have an answer for that one because I
I told you I was gonna make you think.
Yeah, that's a deep question because um, hmm, I really just living my life the way I've lived it, and
Yeah.
my faith is important to me, and everything that I've done, and it's like probably I guess probably the thing that's kind of pushed me over the edge more than anything is being able to reach out and help people and understand
Mm.
that's more important than any money that I make.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I know we're coming to the end. I'm okay if we go a little over, but you and I were talking about how we've kind of had a few pivots in
Yeah,
life recently,
yeah,
right? About me like leaving behind my finance career to focus on helping people on LinkedIn, really not only become seen, but sharing their story and ultimately monetizing it, because that's really what business entrepreneurship, we use these fancy words,
yeah,
but it's really about monetizing your story. And that was something that you and I have been talking about, how and I believe I shared it yesterday at the audio room, how for me I've probably had the worst quarter of my life, like over the past 8 years, but it's been the most fulfilling quarter, because how do you really like quantify, like, changing people's lives, like getting people to giving them an opportunity to like share their story, helping people um really be vulnerable and like honest with themselves, right? So many things that you can't quantify. And I'm curious for you, because you and I were talking about it, where do you really see the next like year or so with your business coaching, and like how have you kind of found your purpose through it? Because I can tell that from our conversations that we've had both in the pre-live and before that, this is something that you're really passionate about. And tell us a little more about that.
well, here's really how I see that playing out. And this is just the beginning. Um, and as I look at here in the next year, is to spend more time investing in lives of people, because I've found I found my center. I found my passion. I found my purpose, and that is helping people get unstuck. Because that's where I was for way too long. And so just to be able to reach out to help people, you know, the money will come. You do what you want long enough, and people will pay you. And that's really my focus on you know is just building relationships, and you know spending time getting better myself. And you know I'm a I'm a multifaceted guy. I don't just do one thing, and I'll never be able to do just one thing. My wife says I don't do well at multitasking, and I don't probably. But the reality is, if I'm not doing something, I get bored.
Mm,
And so, whether it's coaching, whether it's rehabbing a house, whether it's
mm,
flipping a house, whatever it is, I'm going to be active. I'm going to be
yeah,
out there. I'm going to be doing it.
yeah,
And people can buy into that passion. They can buy into that zest, or they don't.
yeah,
Uh, but
exactly.
if somebody wants to do something, I'll help them figure out how to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's nothing that I'm not. People say, "Well, I'm scared to try this." What's there to be scared of? It's either you do it or you don't.
Yeah. I remember the one of the most like powerful things that changed kind of my whole perspective it's the quote that is on the banner for this show, and I put it on because it's so true. Like, be more afraid of being nothing than being something, right? And it was
Yep.
interesting when I was hearing you talk about change, because for me, and I guess because I've always been like the outlier and the odd one, I've never really like feared change. I always knew what would happen if I stayed where I was at, but I
Mm,
didn't know what would happen if I kind of leaned into uncharted waters, or if I did things that I haven't done before. And that's really kind of how this whole idea of impossible equals impossible happened. And I know for you, because we were talking about it not only throughout the show, but before it, how when you reflect on your life, you've done so many things that you thought were impossible, right? Until you turn it into impossible. And the question I feel that's probably one of the greatest questions for people to really consider and answer is is this idea of what is your currency for life, right? Like for me, it's
yep.
impact, right? And I know it's funny because we're going back to the whole philosophy thing again,
Yep. Yep.
but it's really, and what I found, because I've spent most of my professional career in finance, is that the reason why people were always broke is because money was their greatest currency. And
Yep.
if money is your greatest currency, you will always be broke,
Yep.
because it can always be taken from you. Right?
Mm,
Like, you can't take away from me the thousands of people that I've helped. You can't take away from me the conversations and the impact that I've been able to have on thousands of people that I didn't know a year ago on LinkedIn, right? And that's why for me impact became my currency, because I found that when I was operating, going back to your whole like philosophy thing, within my code of life, everything tend to work out. And I know for a lot of people, like, because I get it, I'm still going through the whole spirituality thing, but I really do believe that there's a lot of truth in that. Money is really nothing more than a form of energy, right?
mhm.
And if my mentor always had this saying of she's never met a good soul that hasn't won in the world, right? And maybe like the people don't win financially, but if your measure of what your currency in life is impact, then money becomes kind of irrelevant, right?
Right.
So I love what you shared. This has been an incredible interview. This has been so fun, and I saw that you had a couple of people who are interested in the audience, and they. I don't know like what's going on with LinkedIn Live, because I haven't seen comments in a while, and I was checking on the actual like feed, and some people were saying they were having trouble, but good thing that this is on YouTube as well. And Lee, I'll definitely get you the link so you can share it across your socials, or if you have
Okay.
family members that want to hear your first
Sure.
live show podcast type of thing. But this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for your time, for your vulnerability. I know you shared a lot of things here that you haven't shared publicly before. You and I were talking about how it's a whole different ball game
Yes.
when you do live video, just because this is on the internet for forever
Yeah.
essentially. But you crushed it, my friend. I'm gonna hand the floor to you. Any final thoughts? Anything that you want to share? Anything that you want to promote? And for everyone in the audience watching on replay, watching on YouTube, definitely go connect with Lee. Go have a conversation with him. Um, Incredible story, incredible experience in real estate and business, and you never know where a conversation will go, right? My mentor always says that we're one conversation, connection, decision, action away from a completely different life, right? And Lee could be that person for you. So I highly encourage you to reach out to him to connect. But yeah, with that, I will hand it to you, Lee.
Well, thank you, Paul. And my my code of life would be legacy. I love the word impact, but legacy is something, what people will always remember you by, and that's kind of why I always have it, and actually it's in my profile, is to leave a godly legacy. But it comes, you leave a legacy by making impact on people's lives, and that's, I appreciate this time to share, Paul, and I appreciate this platform, and I would be happy to, yeah, connect with anybody at any point. If you have any questions regarding real estate, I'd be happy to field those as well. But again, I'm just grateful for this opportunity, Paul, and I appreciate everything that you do.
Oh, Lee, not a problem, my friend. I'm glad that we were able to do it. I'm glad that I got to be the first. I always joke with people, you never
Yeah,
forget the first. So it's always cool to get to do that for other people, right? Because I remember you and I were kind of talking in the beginning about you're like okay with being a public speaker. Well, I remember when I started like speaking, it was kind of like a disaster. There was a lot of rejection. I had to really like earn my way to the stage, and
hmm,
that was the whole story behind ultimately why I created the show and a lot of my audio events was I was getting burnt out of earning my way to the stage, and I was like, I have a message, I have a network, like
right,
why shouldn't I just create my own stage? And ever since I've spoken on a few podcasts like since, but now that I just create my own stages, I just collaborate with people. You don't need to
right,
ask anymore, and it's just so powerful when you can really look back on how things started versus where they're currently at, and then it just makes you excited because you're like, darn, this much happened, and I haven't even scratched the surface. So it's like just excited for where things are kind of heading. But no, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for everybody in the audience who showed up. I really appreciate your time. I'm so grateful because you're not going to get it back. But Lee dropped so much valuable insight today. Definitely what you shared about was it your the thing that you shared in the beginning about how purpose leads to attitude.
oh,
Yeah.
philosophy.
Philosophy, yeah.
Philosophy leads to attitudes, attitudes to actions, actions to results, and results to lifestyle.
Yeah, that was powerful. So thank you so much for being here, Lee. And to everyone, we will see you next week on Impossible Equals Impossible. I have another incredible guest coming on as always, and I can't wait for you to hear his story because I mean, man, what a powerful story. Thank you so much for being here, Lee. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night, everyone.
You too.
Let's see.